Hey everyone, it is The Deep Dive. I'm Paul Machin here for the first time. Well, sort of, we've already done a show. We'll talk about that in a second. But alongside Josh Williams, who is kindly guiding me through the world of Liverpool numbers and beyond. We've already done a show on Georgi Mamardashvili and why Liverpool have gone for him and why Josh thinks he is a cheat code of a goalkeeper. If you want to check that out, go to redmenplus.com. Because as you can see, I'm here and I'm hosting a bunch of shows over on Plus this week. I've got a special code. I'm going to give you guys 3 months for the price of one over on redmenplus.com. Head over, choose a monthly captain subscription and use the code MATE. You can scan the QR code on screen right now and get 3 months for the price of one. Get the Mamardashvili show. You'll get the Bias Transfer podcast from yesterday and you'll get me talking to Paul Gorst on Journo Insight on Thursday, as well as a whole bunch of other amazing stuff as well. So fill your boots on all of that. But today we're going to turn our attention to transfers, more transfers, wild speculation. There was a point during yesterday where I wasn't sure what the hell we were going to do on this show, if I'm honest. Chris said, you could do something on corners. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll look at the corners. And then...
Loves a set piece, Chris.
He does love a set piece. I mean, this is the man who literally made Lucas Leiva explain Donald Markin in his back garden when he was playing for Lazio for us. Obviously, we've seen the transfer rumours for Federico Chiesa. We're going to talk about him. If we've got time, we'll go into Lucharel Geertruida as well, who's just popped its head back up again in the last 24 hours or so as well. And just talk about Liverpool's general sort of squad depth and shape and maybe some of the business and thinking behind it all. But let's start really with where we're at so far, Josh. It's been an underwhelming summer of transfers so far. We've obviously just talked about Mamardashvili, smart piece of business, but everything that Liverpool have done so far has basically been players being shipped out. It's been hard to kind of fathom what the plan is. Do you feel like you've got a clearer idea of what the plan is now we've started to see people out, or is it still...
Yeah, well, I always felt that we'd predominantly do outgoings this summer. I think we had a big squad. I think people underestimate the depth we've got. Some of them aren't at the level, but they still count as numbers. So I think, and I think sales for the most part as well have been good. I think it's important to note that Liverpool seem to be good at selling again. I think we've raised something like 60 odd million through selling players who wouldn't have even got like a single start in the Premier League. Yeah. So, that's good business. I think the incomings, I think the important thing to note on that is Liverpool have tried, or at least wanted, to sign certain players. Like Anthony Gordon, he was supposedly sitting in there with Gomez and that didn't end up happening. Zubimendi, just like Spanish mountains, so you can't get him out of there. You can't drag him out of his home, can you? So if he chooses that, he chooses that. And then Yoro, we just didn't seem to want the smoke of Real Madrid and Man United, and financially. But we did like the player, so. And
it's a tough situation, this, because the Yoro stuff, I'll be honest, I'd almost completely forgotten Liverpool were in for him because Manchester United have clearly taken an approach with him, and that is to treat an 18-year-old as though he's a 24-year-old best member of your squad, almost, in terms of how the money they've thrown at to make that happen. And that didn't feel like something that maybe Liverpool were prepared to go all the way in on. For better or for worse, it is what they've kind of chosen to do. I think what's interesting as well, because as the summer's gone on, we're learning about a new manager as well as a new director of football and perhaps a reset in terms of what Liverpool are doing in the transfer market. And I do think the way the manager plays is important to that. We'll have a little look, but if I was to ask you, I know you and Chris have had many a conversation this summer around what formation Liverpool are going to play. The manager wildly disagreed with Chris's take on this. What would you say is Liverpool's formation under Arne Slot?
Are we going there? Yeah.
We've played 2 competitive games of football. It has been broadly the same 11 in a very similar sort of layout. What would you say is Liverpool's formation?
So I said we could have done a show a couple of weeks ago, me and Chris, and we could have just titled the show Arne Slot is a liar. And just did like an entire show on the fact he's lying. Anyway, so usually we talk about formations based on the defensive shape, because with the ball it kind of just goes a little bit fluid and all that. So defensively for me, Liverpool have been like that, like a 4-4-2 pretty much. That's a 4-4-2, innit? Yeah.
I'm going to just move these guys back a bit
Make it a
so it
little
looks
bit more,
more
yeah.
four. Yeah. Go on.
So that's how
For any
Liverpool-
English people watching who will feel a deep distaste toward not seeing a flat 4-4-2.
Yeah. That's how Liverpool have defended. And then when Liverpool have had the ball, for me, it's looked a bit more like this, where they advance up the field, this fella stays high, and this fella kind of plays a little bit of like a in-between spot like that. So I would interpret that as 4-2-3-1, because you've got a quite clear double pivot, and the game is being built by these players here. So, you know, a kind of back four and a midfield two and all that, and then their responsibility is to get the ball upfield to these four. So there's been situations, mainly against Ipswich, where Liverpool have looked a bit more 4-3-3, where Szoboszlai's come a little bit deeper to help out and stuff. So to a certain extent it is telephone numbers. But I would say 4-2-3-1. What about you?
See, I would say it's. I think we get lost in the two in the double pivot, because our instant thing is go double pivot. It's either 4-4-2 or it's 4-2-3-1, and because it kind of has to be, because we've been so used to going back to Brendan Rodgers of this whole idea of flipping the triangle, which is what he used to call it, when Liverpool all of a sudden were playing what we've come to accept a three-man midfield is, where you've got your lone six and then you've effectively got eights, as we call them, either side. Whereas I think I get what Slot's saying, because I think he thinks as this third guy as a midfield, and by all accounts, if Salah's still Salah, so Salah's not a right midfielder, he's a right winger or a right inside forward or whatever you want to call him. So I don't think he wants to count him in this row, because I think Xherdan Shaqiri would have made that a 4-2-3-1 if he plays in that, but Salah plays far too far up the pitch for him to be that. Long story short, what I would say, I've come to the generalised conclusion that we play a 4-2-1-3. If we were to call it that, which is effectively 4-3-3, which is effectively 4-2-3-1, splitting hairs, whatever you want to do. Because if we're playing a 10, and we've come to accept that this is much more of a 10 than we've seen it under Jurgen Klopp, whether it's Elliott or Szoboszlai playing it, that's where I'm sort of at with it.
If it's a midfield three, if Slot is adamant that it's a midfield three, it's at times certainly very lopsided and asymmetric, because you can say it's a midfield three because technically you are playing Szoboszlai, who we have seen at Liverpool play as a number 8. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see him still label it as a 4-3-3. But at times, specifically when you're building from the back and that, it's like that. That's what it's like. So that's not a 4-3-3 as I know it.
4-2-4.
Yeah. So it is telephone numbers with the ball, but for the most part, it's definitely a double pivot and two really wide players who have to be good at, dribbling and all that, which we're going to touch on.
Well, absolutely. I'm just going to pull Szoboszlai back for this for a moment, because what I've based it on is around this, and it's kind of a much to much. It's based on the idea that broadly we're playing a double pivot, and by and large, this guy is much more of a 10 than we're kind of used to.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've worked out Liverpool's squad depth based on the outs, and based it on Liverpool's senior players that we've got available. So we've 21 players who've featured in the first 2 games of the season. That's to say, been involved on the substitutes bench, not necessarily played any minutes. So like Joe Gomez and Kelleher, for example, 0 minutes, but they've been involved in the matchday squads. As a note, the average age of those 21 players that we've used so far is 27.5, which is actually older than both Manchester City and Arsenal, which I thought was quite interesting. Yeah. And it makes sense when you consider that all our best players are in the 30s, but kind of by the by. I've put on there are potential additional players that we don't quite know about yet. So Stefan Bajcetic would, I think, if you get to September 1st or September, August, whatever, and he's not been moved out, then he goes into the depth chart for Liverpool because he's a first team member of, I think. And Ben Doak is one that we've seen be part of the first team setup, but we're told that he's potentially either up for sale or available for loan. And Trey Ione, because he's constantly being talked about by Slot, he's training with the first team, but he's so young that you might never see him kick a ball this season. But he's in and around the mix. But for the sake of just simplicity, I've pulled the younger players out of that sort of depth. And then in addition to that, what we've seen is we'll talk about, we've seen Federico Chiesa linked, we've seen Geert linked, and another couple of similar sort of utility can play a bit of left back or full back or centre half, and obviously Martin Zubimendi as well. Now, where I fell down on this, and I think people can debate the merits or qualities of certain footballers here, but we are not a million miles away from having 2 senior footballers for each position on the pitch.
Yeah.
And in years gone by, I remember, gosh, tons of people doing depth charts, and James Milner would be in 4 positions on them,
yeah.
and Jordan Henderson would be in 2, and Harvey Elliott would be in 2, and you go, well, that's not depth because you're using the same players. So I thought it was quite an interesting thought experiment to see just where Liverpool are at. Looking at that, I've ringed the sort of obvious sort of situations that Liverpool are having to face. What does that make you think or feel looking at that?
No, I think you're spot on. I think it's so far we're at a point where we're very close to having 2 teams essentially.
Yeah.
And we're going to need, when people realise this season the new Champions League format, they're going to realise why Liverpool seem to be interested in that. But yeah, I think Salah's now reached a point in his career where you do want to give him that break every now and then. We tried to give him the break on the weekend by taking him off, but you bring on Harvey Elliott, who's a completely different kind of wide player.
Yeah.
In my opinion, not a slot wide player. Doesn't have that 1v1 stuff about him, doesn't have the speed, the pacing behind it, anything like that. I think Elliott's a middle player for the centre of the pitch. So that's definitely a massive void. I think the 6 is another huge void, hence the Zubimendi link. And beyond that, I personally think that being able to give Van Dijk a break is another void. I think Gomez will get sold personally, but even if he doesn't get sold, he's not a specialist on that side, and he's not left-footed either. So Virgil's like 34, is he? Something like that.
Yeah.
33. So you get into that point where you want to give Virgil the odd little break if possible. I think Tsimikas, I agree with you, but I think this season, I think he's safe for now.
And this is why I've ringed Gomez and Tsimikas in orange, because I don't think either of them are first 11 players at this stage of their careers. And to say when everyone else is fit, when all those lads who are above them in the line are fit, I don't think either of them get in a first 11. This is our big game of the week. If you're choosing your strongest 11, I don't think either of them get in there. But I would have no qualms about either of them playing games of football for Liverpool. I think they've both proven themselves to be more than capable, but I do see them as upgradable. But if you told me you couldn't upgrade them this summer, I wouldn't necessarily lose any sleep over it. The reason I've ringed Endo is because quite clearly we've identified that he's not quite what they're looking for, and we've already tried to sign someone who plays in that position. We've been told that that's not the case. So it leads us forward of like, why are Liverpool being linked with Federico Chiesa? Why are Liverpool having conversations with Juventus and his agents about this? And it boils down to this. I think if you're prioritising what you need to do now, I'm going on good faith that they haven't got any targets they feel are attainable for that defensive midfield slot, because that surely should still be the number one priority.
It is worth saying as well, Gravenberg's done well.
Yes.
So it's not as much of a... Well, it is a pressing need, don't get me wrong, but if Salah comes out the team, if he gets injured or if he really needs a break or whatever, you literally have nobody else, really. I get the impression with Jota, I always thought Jota was a suitable alternative a little bit. I get the impression with Slot that he only has an interest in playing Jota here.
Yes.
And that's literally it. So I do think it's growing in priority terms, the kind of alternative for Salah. And Chiesa kind of fits the bill, really. We'll
come on to the obvious sound sides of him, like injuries and what have you in a minute. But just from what you're saying there, we're talking stylistic fits first and foremost from him, because by all accounts, he is a dribbler.
Yeah.
He is someone, how well his pace is going to adapt to the Premier League will be a question, of course. The last player to do it that we know was Mohamed Salah, and he did it really well because it turns out he was dead fast. But often players coming from Serie A struggle to have that sort of level of impact. But is that first and foremost it? When you look at what we've got down this side, Doak has definitely got that. But it looks like they're going, he's just too young and too raw at this stage. Can we get someone who can be a little bit more threatening in one-on-one situations? Yeah,
well, I think he is definitely a slot kind of wide player. He's very direct, good on the dribble, likes to carry the ball, quick enough to threaten him behind, will get shots in and around these areas and stuff. And on top of that as well, though, if Salah does just keep doing Salah where he plays every week, Chiesa can play on the opposite side, and he's accustomed to, for Fiorentina and for Juve, playing in a front two, in a 3-2-5 formation. So when you say sometimes we're able to play being versatile, and it's kind of nonsense because he's actually not. It turns out not to be. Chiesa is definitely versatile, and on top of that, he offers that, as we just said, that Salah alternative where if Salah's not playing and you play Chiesa in his place, you can still play exactly the same way. Yeah. You're not adapting massively. You don't have to change your tactics completely. Slot can keep working on this one system because you've got 2 players for every spot.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, that because that's you mentioned about Harvey Elliott. I think there's situations where he's absolutely fine, generally speaking, on the right. But if you're trying to get something up and running, to have to switch to something that's not it is almost coaching time wasted, because you've got to train ill fits for your squad, whereas the more pieces you can get. And one of the things we were told about his Feyenoord side was this: he loves his wingers, and he'll burn his wingers out, and then he'll bring them off and he'll bring on more lads to kind of keep doing the same thing. And that feels like why Chiesa would be one of them, really.
Well, imagine defending against Salah for 60 minutes. You've done a relatively all right job, and then you bring on a fresh Chiesa for half an hour.
Yeah.
He's just a really busy forward, very, very active, and will go right at you. And if he gets tackled and he gets the ball 5 minutes later, he goes right at you again, just like he's forgotten about what happened 2 minutes ago. So, yeah, I like the player. I think his output is good. Obviously, there's some downsides, but I think all of them are just mitigated by the price.
Well, let's circle back around. Let's go through some of the just the general numbers on him, if you don't mind, please, Joe. So, like, I mean, very, very top line stuff here from FB Ref, of course, but he's, in terms of passing, pass completion, progressive passes, progressive carries, I think is a really interesting one in there. 97th percentile for progressive carries speaks to that of a player who's going to go and take the ball and drive with it, which is a fundamental difference between how Harvey Elliott would potentially do that role. So yeah, I mean, look, anyone who's watched him play will have known this instinctively, but it is also interesting to see it backed up in the stats, because you can get an idea of a guy's a dribbly guy, but it's actually interesting to see it, to have that corroborated really by the numbers.
Yeah, well, sometimes you'd be surprised, sometimes you think a player dribbles a bit more than he actually does. Some players who are really quick, just you check the numbers and they don't actually dribble that much. So Chiesa there looks like a very typical, wide winger where he's a problem for you. A wide winger, what's that?
Yeah.
Where he's a problem for you. So he's receiving progressive passes. He's a bit of an outlier for that, expected. Progressive carries, he's carrying the ball over large distances, again, expected. Take-ons, progressive passes, and I think above all else, he looks really, really creative, when it comes to his expected goals assisted and his shot-creating actions as well. So everything that you would want from a typical slot-wide player, he's ticking all of those boxes. He's a little bit older than ideal, but profile-wise at least, it's definitely a match.
One thing I struggled with the access to sort of data I had on this was trying to compare him, because you can't. It's almost not fair to compare him to Salah, because you can't really compare anyone to Mo Salah. Yeah. Harvey Elliott doesn't have enough like for like, also because Chiesa played predominantly behind Vlahovic in more of a 10 last season than out wide. His data's a little bit skewed as a result of it, but he is seen as a forward rather than a midfielder. What I thought was interesting was then I compared him to Diaz and Gakpo, and again, it was still a little bit of an ill fit. Cody Gakpo, by the way, if anyone wants to smile at how good a footballer looks on FB Ref, go and look at Cody Gakpo's numbers. Just like, whoa, chef's kiss. By the by, what I thought was interesting to do then was to compare Chiesa with Diaz and Gakpo in terms of just goals and assists.
Yeah.
Now, I will caveat all of this with, it is difficult to do this because of how leagues are rated. So as an example, I'm never quite sure where the Portuguese league ranks. It always seems to float between the 5th and 6th. In terms of, in FB Ref in particular, whether it's one of the top leagues or not quite one of the top. I think it is at the moment.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
to be honest, I
think it is. But so what I've done is I've just pulled appearances in the Portuguese league for Diaz, the Premier League and Champions League. For Gakpo, it's the Eredivisie, Premier League and Champions League, and Chiesa's only played in Serie A, so it's Serie A and Champions League. And the additional caveat with Gakpo is the Dutch league is definitely not one of the top 5
No.
big leagues. So it does, again, excuse the numbers, getting good goals and assists is a less valuable feat in Eredivisie than it would be in the Premier League or Serie A.
Liverpool have the models, by the way, to factor that in.
Yes.
They have, like, you know, the difficulty and, you know, basically waiting more if you score against Barcelona than if you score against go-ahead Eagles or something like that, you know what I mean? So
now, the couple of things that kind of stuck out for me is that by and large, he's getting a goal or an assist far less frequently than Luis Diaz and Gakpo over that time. Now, again, I would caveat that with, again, just the quality of whatever he's up against. One little note of interest that in the Champions League, he's averaging a goal or assist every 113 minutes, which is better than either of those other two guys, which is Gakpo has basically done nothing in the Champions League up to his career. So that is 161 minutes, I think he's played in the Champions League and not scored a goal or got an assist in that. So by the by. The big thing, madly, that stands out though, he's played 235 times in Serie A. He's played 16,000 plus minutes in one of the top leagues in Europe at 26. And that puts him in Diaz's and Gakpo's age category as well, by the way. So it's that experience in addition to actually everything else that he's bringing. So while he's not absolutely blowing either of our existing wide options away in anything, what he does, it fits into what I see him as, is it's an opportunistic signing. He's not a guy who's going to come in, because I think what you should be looking to do, I always say you should be looking to improve your first 11.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a player who today improves Liverpool's best 11, but he definitely improves our bench options.
Yeah.
And he definitely adds depth and quality, as opposed to maybe the gamble that would be having someone like Doak on the bench instead.
Exactly, yeah. I agree with you. I don't think he improves the starting 11, but he improves the bench to a certain level that if you remove Salah, you no longer fall off a cliff on this side of the pitch.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing, because Salah can't play every single game. It's a longer season than ever this term. People will realise that, as I said. And in terms of his numbers as well, obviously he's playing in a harder league in Serie A, but on top of that as well, like, Serie A is a weird league tactically. Like, apart from Atalanta, there's no other team really that I've ever really been philosophy based, where, you know, every week's the same performance no matter the scoreline, and you're very attack minded and possession based. And that the way Italian teams tend to do things, it's just very strategic. So if you take a 1-0 lead, it's like chess. It's a different game. So if Chiesa is playing for a team like that, they're going to depress his numbers a little bit. And then on top of that, if he's playing in a spot that doesn't really benefit him, which was on the left of it too, I think, with Vlahovic over here, he's a wide player. He wants to be out wide, and he found himself doing a lot of that, a lot of drifting out wide. So I think if you put that player with them numbers in a Liverpool team, it's completely different. I think his numbers naturally just pop a little bit more.
Particularly when you see and it's, again, small data range or small sample range, I feel like we've really simplified the message for the wide men this season and said, right, get the ball, go on your man. Go and have a go at your man. It doesn't matter if it doesn't come off. I just want you to terrorise the guy that's in front of you as much as possible, because if you get in a one-on-one and you get past him, we're in. And actually someone like Chiesa feels like it suits his skill set more than, let's say, a Jurgen Klopp Liverpool side that would have asked you to be doing hyper-intense sprints up and down the pitch all game long.
I think that it's just basically it's press, dribble, carry, create shots, get shots. And Chiesa ticks all of those boxes. I think the shots part, getting shots part, he has the odd pot shot. He does like to have a little go from goal, from outside the box and things like that. That will maybe have to be worked on. But again, that could stem from Juventus. When it comes to Liverpool, the whole game gets played here. So if that's the case, he's playing with the likes of Trent and that, by the way, you will find him in these valuable areas and all that. So I think we could see a lot of his game transform, whereas Diaz is coming from Porto. Porto, very dominant, dominate the Portuguese league, play in the same way every week. PSV, very similar, with Gakpo. So I'm very intrigued to see how he does, but as a profile, as a base, and another thing with that minutes thing, by the way, the experience, that's also a sample size thing, where Liverpool will absolutely be able to do their own work and know what they're getting, whereas someone who's a bit more raw, it's a bit more of a gamble because there's more unknowns there.
Well, they're saying, they're looking for what, like 125 around that sort of games to be able to have enough data there to make a solid judgment call. Well, you're doubling that just in Serie A alone.
Exactly, yeah.
Then you count, obviously, international experience on top of that. 51 Italian caps, played at major tournaments as well, so definitely all in his favour. Can we talk about the injury stuff? Because that's the big one. That's the big red flag.
Yeah.
How do you feel about his injury record?
Yeah, I've done my own work on the injuries, right, and I think it's majorly exaggerated.
Okay.
I don't know about you, but the way I interpreted it was 2022. He starts 2022 and he's kind of the next big thing around that point. He does well at Fiorentina. Juventus move heaven and earth to get him, to the extent where I think they loaned him for 2 years with some mad obligation to buy or something, 55 million or whatever. They're still doing things like that now, by the way. So 2022 he starts and he picks up an ACL. So you write off the rest of 2022. So you start from 2023. And from 2023 till now, he's had 18 months of evidence. And I think in that 18-month period, he's had 2 instances where he's missed more than 2 weeks. Only 2 in 18 months. And both of those instances around the 2 week have been around 2 weeks of missing action. He's not missing 3 months.
Yeah.
He's not, so it's, I can absolutely, if you look at his injury history, there's a lot of injuries, but a lot of them are like, he's missed 5 days with the flu. He's missed 3 days with like a sore toe.
Yeah.
I can absolutely deal with it if Chiesa misses 5 days every now and then. That's not a problem at all.
Yeah.
The problem is a Thiago or even a Jota, where when they get injured, you're missing 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
That's a bigger issue. And Liverpool, by the way, have got 5 forwards anyway. So if Chiesa does miss 2-3 weeks here and there, we have the depth to cope with it temporarily over the course of a season. No. Last season, he played more league minutes than Trent. That's, people aren't taking this into account.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, you're looking at how his season went last year, in terms of just Serie A, he misses the 8th game of the season against Torino with muscular problems, but he's back on the bench and comes off the bench against AC Milan the next game. He has a little spell when he's in and out. I mean, FB ref are really going out with unknown injury here, which makes it sound really, really weird. But again, plays against Genoa, the 90, misses Frosinone, then comes back for Roma, misses Salernitana, back for Sassuolo, misses 2, and then he's back and basically stays in the team for the rest of the season. That's from that's game week 23 all the way through to 38, where he's available and he's playing a lot of 90s in that time as well. So you're right. That little spell, if you were looking for evidence to say, no, he is injury prone, I would be looking at that little 6-game spell when he misses 4 in 6. But actually, when you pull the microscope back a little bit, it's not quite, as you say, it's not quite as telling as all that.
No, I think just having a quick glance now, I'll just quickly reel off the number of days that he's missed, dating back from his most recent injury to the ACL. So, most recent injury, he missed 10 days, 6 days, 5 days, 17 days, 7 days, 15 days, 5, 7, 3, 14, 5. So it's, but a lot of them, I think you can just remove the ones that are less than a week. Yeah. Because there's just not an addict. Yeah. You can cope with, Liverpool have got the depth to cope with that. And
to the point which we always forget, it's why when that stat comes out that the Liverpool starting 11 in Madrid is the first time that 11 started a game of football together, and you go, that's not possible. And it's like, well, it is, because someone's always out for a week, or someone just needs a little bit of rest here and there.
But the thing is as well, Slaughter's showcased in his career so far really good availability with his players, and you got to bear in mind as well, Chiesa will probably arrive with Salah ahead of him, so he's not going to be, getting used up like a bar of soap or something like that. He's gonna have time to recover and things. He's gonna be playing like really intense for like half-hour spells at the end of games or something like that. So I'm not that concerned about his availability, to be honest.
So this leads me to, Is this a market inefficiency that Liverpool are capitalising on here? Because we've seen this. This is what FSG's Moneyball looks like.
Yeah.
It's to take players that the traditional football world has turned their nose up at and bringing them in and getting fined and bargains where other people can't.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the headline would be undervalued. You know, undervalued or underappreciated or whatever. Chiesa looks like that at the moment, and when that's the case, the big first question you always have to ask is like, is it because he's not that good?
Yes.
Or is the reasons behind it? Is the context? Is the financial issues that the club's suffering from? Tactical issues, whatever. And I think there's a lot of them. And I think you can look at that situation and think, right, if you bring him to Liverpool, how many of the issues he's suffered from at Juve can we just disregard and because he won't suffer from them at Anfield? And I think there's a lot of them. So in terms of his value and what you're getting for that, and I think it's definitely in the brackets of a market inefficiency, and it goes back to Richard Hughes' line where he said opportunistic signings. It's definitely in that bracket.
Yeah, no, I'm leaning towards that, and I have the fears, of course, because you've mentioned, if you know, like Thiago's the one that's most recently. I mean, Arthur Melo is the extreme example of how badly it can go.
Yeah, all scarred.
Mario Balotelli's at the other end of the scale of like, is there a reason? Why is this guy available when all his numbers look great? But why is he not wanted where he's wanted? And then you look at it and you go, well, you know, new manager at Juventus, he's been there for a while now. He's been kind of again shunted around a little bit. The manager wants to put his own stamp on things. His contract's up.
That's a big one,
and that is a huge one as well. So it's interesting that if he was valued at £10 million, you'd be like, why? No good player is valued at £10 million, but it might just be that wonderful little Venn diagram of his contract's expiring. There's a lot of traditional people who don't want to do the depth of analysis, who go, he's had a cruciate. Why do we want to play? He suffered from a cruciate knee injury. One of the points I made on a show earlier, Virgil van Dijk's had a cruciate knee injury and he's our captain. He plays every week. Yeah. Luis Diaz had something similar when he was out for a long spell as well. It's Joe Gomez has had two. I think at this point, and okay, he's not quite, he's suffered a drop off in terms of where he's at in the team, but he's available for every game last season, by the way. So there are plenty of examples of footballers who've been through those injuries, and Liverpool, even an intense Jurgen Klopp Liverpool side, have managed to get games out of them.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's financial with Juve. I mentioned earlier about how they moved heaven and earth to get him in and that, and committing to transfer fees 2 years down the line and things like that. I think they've reached the point now where his contract expires in a year. He's currently a really high earner for them. I think he earns about 180 grand a week, according to FBref. And they've just appointed Thiago Motta, who's a new coach, and they're trying to get in quite a few players to install this new era and that. They want to get Coop Miners in, for example, from Atalanta. He's costing quite a bit. They've just got two wingers in. One of them's on loan. In fact, I think they're both on loan. One of them's an option to buy, one of them's an obligation to buy. They've just sold a centre-half to Bournemouth. Dean Huijsen, something like that, I think it is. Really good player, 19 years old. They shouldn't be selling him. Yeah. If they had their ducks in a row or whatever, the house in order, they wouldn't be losing those players. So I wouldn't have any doubts about, I don't think it's a case of Juve selling them. He must be crap. It's nonsense, that.
I saw the point, and I've made this point about a couple of players. Someone say, if Manchester United were making this signing, you'd be thinking this is a catastrophic move. And I think that can be true, but ultimately Manchester United aren't making this move. So it's whether you trust in what Liverpool are doing behind the scenes or not. Yeah. Because my logic with De Ligt is, why are Manchester United able to pick up what should be the next great centre-half of European football for a relative snip when other top quality ones have gone in? They paid 80 million for Harry Maguire, 75 million went for Van Dijk for us, etc. So what is your overall feeling on this as a target, regardless of whether Liverpool ultimately sign him or not, and whether Liverpool are in the market for him?
So I think on the Man United point, I think there's an element of truth in that. But I think in that way, you're missing the point almost. Or the fellow who said it. Hello, Mo. But I think he's missing the point in the sense that Liverpool are signing him. not Man United. So if you look at why Liverpool are getting him and the need that he's addressing for Liverpool, it's a 6th choice forward. It's a forward behind Mo Salah. If Man United get him, there's an element of reliance on him where he's got to deliver every single week, and he's probably coming in as a starter and stuff, and their attack's already a bit toothless. So it is a completely different dynamic. So every situation is different. Every team dynamic's different. You've got to look at the price that you're getting them for as well. So I think if you look at the pros and the cons, specifically in relation to the spot that he'll address at Liverpool, or even if it's not that spot, even if it's just like a versatile option for the entire front line, it still works. So for €15 million, absolutely a gamble worth taking in my eyes. Like, and I think the upside is a lot higher than the potential downside of it. And any issues you've got, any concerns you've got with like injuries or wages or anything like that, or maybe not paying you back, you can deal with that with the deal. Yeah. Just give him a 3-year contract or something like that, or you know, heavily incentivize it with appearances or goals or something. So I'm really in favour of it. I think the player's really good, and I think he could do with a fresh start, and I think Liverpool could potentially harvest a little bit from him, like they did with Shaqiri. Funnily enough, I think Shaqiri is a good example.
You would have to have an Artemelo or even Thiago style injury nightmare for you to not make your money back on him in a year or two's time as well.
Yeah, it's worth noting as well that before the ACL, he plays a lot. So before the ACL, he's a 21-year-old for Fiorentina, and he starts 31 Serie A games. Season before that, he starts 34. Season before that, he starts 35. So he's playing every single week, like Salah, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Then he gets the ACL. But last season, he starts 25. So you just got to hope that he's done a Joe Gomez and he's kind of recovered from it.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Let's move things on then. Obviously not one that's quite as prevalent on the radar and being discussed as such, but I did notice the Luchel Geertruida link crop up again. We've seen that Joe Gomez is being linked heavily with a move before the transfer window shuts. Crystal Palace are seen as the favourite at the moment. It looks like there's the Mark Guehi sort of merry-go-round going on. I have looked at this guy before. When Slot was coming in, this was like the most obvious, I'll just bring this lad with me signing I think I've ever seen. Yeah. You know, more obvious than Joe Allen, kind of in a way. But you know, I don't know. We turn our noses up looking back at historically at the Joe Allen thing, like. But obviously, it was a good footballer. Like,
I think Barini was the worst one, mate.
Yes, Barini was the worst example of it. Like, yeah, he bites his hand as his celebration. We did a lot of knuckle biting whenever he went through on goal and missed chances. Anyway, Geertruida, utility defender, 11 Dutch caps, Slot's captain at Feyenoord. Looks like he's going to be available reasonably cheap as well. I'm not sure whether this is a Gomez goes, he replaces Gomez's role in the squad. I think he absolutely has that feel because he's a guy who plays, I think he's played 4 times this season, 3 of them at centre-half, but last season he's predominantly a right-back or a left-back under Slot. He's comfortable moving into midfield. He's good up and down the flanks as well. I like the look of this guy. I do. I'm not saying he's going to come in. I can't see how he gets in off first 11. You know, he's not taking any of the starting 11 from the weekend slots in the back 4. But if you were to, for me, if I was going to bring someone in as a break glass solution to a number of things. Yeah. I think you could do far worse than Geertruida, don't you think?
Yeah, I like him as a player. I think he is similar to Trent in the sense that he can do right back stuff, invert into midfield stuff, then some final third stuff as well. So good all rounder, and on top of that, unlike Trent, he can actually play centre half. Yeah. I think there was times last season where he plays left back. The only problem I have with it, and this is why I don't think it would happen, is because he does favour this side of the pitch without doubt. Mm-hmm. And I think if you look at the depth we've got, you do have Trent and Bradley here, and you do have Kwanzaa and Kanate here. So if you're bringing them in, maybe you can act as a Gomez, as in third choice here, third choice there. But whether Liverpool would do that, I think there's a question mark there. Maybe you're looking at potentially Trent going in 12 months and you're looking at a contingency plan there with that.
Well, just to go back to the depth thing for the sake of talking, if you then moved, if we can get that graphic up, Joe, if you moved Trent into Endo's position there for the sake of argument and brought Geertruida in to then play that out with Bradley down the right-hand side, have you improved Liverpool's overall squad depth by doing that?
Marginally,
put it on your toes here, mate.
Marginally, I think you have, yeah, marginally. But I don't, just based on what I've seen so far, I just don't think Slot has that much of an interest in Trent being a midfielder. I think he likes him as a right back.
I thought it was interesting that he didn't shut it down when he was asked the other week about this. He talked about at the Euros, you saw him do it. You seen him do it at times. He almost kind of, I suppose he referred to it almost like how Klopp used him last season. That he's a right back. He's going to play right back.
Yeah.
But there might be situations in game state where you're going to need to go up a gear and actually just stick Bradley on for a flying fullback, but you keep your creativity of Trent by just pushing him into midfield.
Yeah.
Could still be the option. Before we'll swing back around to this, but I want to just look at Geertruida before we totally and utterly write him off. Just in terms of some of his performances, because I just thought it was interesting to see how and where he plays. So I've picked out 4 different performances from last year. The first one here is the 6-0 win over Ajax toward the back end of the season. He plays left back in this one. And, you know, it's because you're right in saying he's predominantly right-footed. He plays most on the right-hand side. But that's a very healthy looking, you know, left-hand side for someone, as we've already said.
Oh, he's definitely a versatile player, 100%, and he can play across your back line and things like that. Offers a lot of perks, and I think he'd be a sensible sign. I think he's probably Premier League level as well, so interesting player. But I think if you're getting in a centre half, if you're losing Gomez, I think it would probably be a centre half or even a full or something like that. That kind of player who's just comfortable with this side of the pitch. Yeah. Do you see what I mean?
I mean, I totally... Yeah.
And he is to a certain extent, clearly. But
yes, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, just to run through a couple of quick ones. Now, this is him at right back in the 2-2 draw with PSV. Much more how we'd understand the sort of right back to be playing for Liverpool. I guess that's probably not too dissimilar to what you'd see from Bradley in that side.
Yeah.
In terms of a lot more touches in the opponent's half, and that's actually a big game that as well away from home. It's not like he's being asked to be a sort of like, you know, shrinking violet and stay back and do all of his sort of defending. Another one here is a 4-2 win over Utrecht, which is one of the most bananas ones I've ever seen.
See, that's very strength, isn't it?
So what's fascinating about this is he starts right back, but Hartman, the left back, goes off injured and he shifts to left back. So, but all the same, if you're talking average, so you can see his average position. So his average position actually is right in the centre circle, which makes sense for someone who's played half a game right back and half a game left back. You split the difference. But actually his heat map should still be down the left flank and down the right flank. It wouldn't combine unless he was in the middle of the pitch. So, yeah.
So he must be inverting them.
Yeah, exactly. So he's actually remained inverted, I would guess.
Yeah, I would guess
despite shifting flanks in terms of fullback, which is pretty interesting. And then this one is a full-blown, like...
That's definitely sense.
That is Trent.
Yeah.
This is a 2-0 win over Sparta Rotterdam, where he scores in this game as well, and he is totally unleashed. This is him coming into the middle of the pitch, underlapping, getting into that sort of space behind the front line as well. And you know, always worth caveating the Dutch league. The level isn't the bottom half of the Dutch league is not. I don't even know where you'd be ranking that in terms of like English football. It's definitely Championship, possibly even League One when you're getting down towards the bottom there. But he looks comfortable on the ball. He's comfortable with his back to play in terms of being reasonably press resistant and all that. You don't ask players to invert if they're not comfortable on the ball.
He's a bit of a unit as well.
He is. You know, no, he's not tall.
No,
he's not. I don't think he's comfortably 6 foot. He might be 6 foot. He's there or thereabouts, which concerns me with the centre half thing. But he's a physical lad. He loves the physical side of the game.
He's a little bit Gomez in that sense. You know, quite like, you know, muscular and stuff like that. But I think he's a bit more of a maybe attack-minded, ball-playing version of I think Gomez is a player who you predominantly keep behind the ball, and he doesn't offer too much value on it. Geertruida does. You know, he, as I said, you can use him in the final third, and that's so as an all-rounder. Offers a lot of perks, doesn't have that many weaknesses, and you know, really interesting player, to be honest.
Well, we talked about that left-hand side and looking for the left footer. And a lot of this might just be putting, if Gomez stays, we just might not need it at all. But it goes back to this question of how many centre-halves do you need?
Yeah.
And right now we've got 4. I know Chris's big point we were talking about on the podcast this week was Klopp didn't seem to consider Gomez to be a centre-half anymore. He seemed to see him more as a full-back. Now, we don't know whether that was circumstantial due to injuries, but, certainly he's played a lot of full-back at Liverpool over his time. We don't quite know. Slot's clearly got him behind the other 3 lads that we've seen so far in the pecking order, so it's tough to know where he kind of lies. But I do wonder whether this is, you've seen Gitweed, it's been mentioned in the comments, heavily linked with Villa, but you also look at the players that Arsenal have got. Like, look at their left-back options. So, obviously, everyone goes Zinchenko, but they've now got Calafiori and Timber starts there at the weekend. Now, Timber, you wouldn't see as necessarily being the natural fit for that. Because I think he's right-footed. But
I think he is, yeah.
But, like, that, it's one of them, isn't it, where he's not I don't know that there's a left-footed Gomez, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the voids for me, going back to your depth chart there. I think if Gomez goes, which I think he will, the obvious void is getting in a successor for Van Dijk, who is ideally probably left-footed and very technical and good on the ball and all that. And what that player looks like is difficult, because usually you have to make a trade-off between, right, do you want a ball player or do you want a tank? And usually they're not both. Van Dijk is both, obviously, but a unicorn. But for the most part, you don't get both. So if Liverpool sell Gomez and they have to get that player in before the window closes, that's going to be a test, because the market's limited there. It
feels like Liverpool, again, we talk about this opportunistic signings thing. We'll see what happens in the next 4 days, but there's clearly no one that they feel meets the availability for a start, budget in addition to that, who improves the first 11 considerably, because I don't think any of the players that we're being linked with of late, and I would even contend Zubimendi probably would do, I guess. It'd be hard to see. We won't know until, particularly that midfield, I don't think we'll know until we see someone who he definitely wants playing that, and then it might be like, yeah, obviously. But I've been impressed with Gravenberch so far. I'm not 100% convinced on McAllister in there at the moment, but Zubimendi doesn't feel like the Van Dijk of midfield, if that makes sense.
No, I agree with you, yeah.
He felt like a footballer we were getting in who could do a job, rather than everyone gather around, walk around this guy. This is the future of Liverpool's midfield.
Yeah,
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but there might be a point in the near future where we have to get the next transformer in, because we're in a position now where our 2 main outfield transformers, well, 3 main outfield transformers have got a year left on the contract.
Yeah.
So, it could be a case of Liverpool looking at the current squad and thinking, right, we can't improve this, but next summer or next, even in January, we'll be in a position where we know some of the big hitters are going to go. So we will have to get in the starter, maybe giving it a year before we do that or something. But it's probably it's looking like it's setting up to be a busy end, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just lastly, Michael McGuinness is in the comments, says, what about Nkapie or Inacio? And they're the obvious centre halves who fit that sort of profile of the left-sided, the heir apparent to Virgil van Dijk.
One of the issues I have with Inacio is he's just ordinary physically. Okay. And if you look at the centre halves we've signed when Edwards has been in the building, we typically target basically vending machines, absolute fridge freezers, mate. Yeah. And Inacio's not that. Yeah. Inacio's just like really good on the ball, but in terms of leaving him alone with Liam Delap, for example, like we saw in the first game, there's a chance he just kind of gets a bit bullied. Yeah. So, that trade-off for me is going to be interesting. When we target a centre-half, which is going to happen eventually.
Yes.
Is he going to be a unit or is he going to be a ball player? Because to find a guy who's both will be tricky. And Nkapie's similar.
Well, we've just done this on the Mamadashvili show, and it's on the board. How do you replace the best in the world when you still own the best in the world? Yeah. Because it's 2 things. You've got that, what the shape looks like because you've got it. So, okay, how do we find someone who matches up to that? Well, we know that's going to be a super rare thing for the start. But equally, you can't. Mamardashvili might be the heir apparent to Alisson, but you can't bring him in this season because he's not going to play. And then you've got a goalkeeper who doesn't play football for a year. And then how have you actually then in a year's time he's not, because he's lost a year of development, and this remains the issue. Just get the depth again, please, Joe. This is why the Salah thing makes sense in terms of finding someone maybe in the short term with one eye on in a year or two. You might be able to go and get your 23-year-old next Mo Salah, but you're covered for the short term. But going back to the Van Dijk one, is how you get where's Nketiah playing? Where's he getting his minutes?
Exactly, yeah, that's the problem. And I think another thing on top of that is if the unicorn isn't there now, if the Van Dijk successor isn't quite clearly there in the market, then there's no harm. Well, I suppose there is harm in terms of your performances, but what I'm saying is he might be there in a year. So finding a way to delay that. Like, say, for example, Caicedo, right? When Caicedo goes to Chelsea for 150 million or whatever, 12 months before that, mate, he'd honestly barely even featured in the Premier League. I think I'll get it up now, but he was basically an unknown quantity 12 months before. So he plays he starts 34 Premier League games for Brighton in his final season for them, then moves to Chelsea for a record-breaking fee. Season before that, he starts 8.
Yeah.
Season before that, he starts 10 for Beerschot in Belgium.
Yeah.
So if you was to look for a 6 around that time, if you bought yourself that year to hang on, you then find Caicedo and go, oh, we'll get him in then.
Yeah.
So if there's no obvious Van Dijk heir, they might be in 12 months. So sometimes I think that's why sometimes Liverpool try to, we'll push it back a window, Sometimes it hurts you, and I get the frustration with it, but there's logic there sometimes.
Well, and the issue is, you know, we say this for all the players that don't fit. I've seen Nat Phillips' name said about 50 times in the comments here, going ha ha ha, Nat Phillips. He's 27 years old and we still own him. We can't sell Nat Phillips. For some reason, we can't find a reasonable level for Nat Phillips, which I think is mad, because I would still contend 20 years ago, he's a brilliant centre-half for Liverpool in terms of what football is at that time. And Wataru Endo, as much as there was a couple of links early doors in the window, I don't see clubs beating down a door, beating a path towards Richard Hughes' door, trying to desperately take him off our hands. And that's what you've got to be wary of, is signing someone who then, when in a year's time, you're like, we just got this lad. And I know people are ruthless, and you can care or not care about the humanity of it, but that's how you end up being like Chelsea and doing what Juventus are doing, where you've just got a bunch of players and you just desperately trying to get them off your books, which I think damages your bargaining position, because if you're a selling club and you're brilliant at selling stuff and all of a sudden you're letting players just slide out the door for next to nothing, it makes it a lot harder to go and sell your next player for more than market value. Yeah,
exactly. And the bottom line is, for a player to get better, he needs minutes on the pitch. And, you know, someone said to me around that Caicedo thing, why didn't Liverpool get Caicedo in at the time? Well, we had Fabinho and we had Henderson, who both were far more established as sixes than Caicedo was at the time, playing for Beerschot. So it goes back to Salah playing for Chelsea. He didn't develop at Chelsea because he didn't get minutes. He couldn't get in ahead of Hazard and Willian and Shearer even, you know, players like that who were just far more established than him. So any player that you sign, there's got to be a spot for him. But bottom line, it sounds very simple, but it's, for some reason, it's never really considered.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Yeah, I thought it was interesting to get a balance and then get an idea of what the squad's kind of looking like, because that can certainly be added to with young players, but it's fascinating that a bunch of the lads who really are probably about that level, I mean, to the fact we've just sold 2 lads to Brentford, if they're good enough to play for Brentford, they're certainly good enough to be in Liverpool's squads, you'd imagine, but they're clearly pushing towards, let's get as many senior lads. And I think we forget sometimes, getting Quansah and Bradley up to speed. They had breakout seasons, but that's half a season of football, really, they both sort of had at the top level. I think we're almost actively trying to limit how many young lads we've got around the first team, or we're relying on for the first team. Because Slot might, if he fucks it this year, he's not going to win Liverpool fans back over if he has a disastrous campaign because he's decided to go all in on,
Doug.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I think he knows the bottom line. I think you've seen by his lack of fist pumps and everything so far, that he knows the way in which he will win territory at Liverpool, the way in which he'll get people behind him is simply by winning games. And if you're not good enough, either get sold or go out on loan. And some of the lads that we're seeing get sold, like Bobby Clark and Ben Doak or something like that, like, as frustrating as it is normal. We're just used to not seeing it because it had happened 2 years ago.
Yeah.
The only difference here is they've had a bit of exposure. We know their names, but the bottom line is most of these kids don't make it at Liverpool because they're not the level.
Well, we're not playing Europa League football this year, and that's the long and short of it, is that these guys can get game time and brilliant, and that actually might have been the weirdest knock-on windfall. We've probably almost made up for the loss of revenue of a year of the Europa League compared to Champions League by the money we've made by playing players in that competition and building up their value. There you go, there's 4D chess for you. A few comments. Michael McGuinness says, I like Chiesa, I think he'll be a decent signing. Soren Ledet says, I'm fine with getting Chiesa if Liverpool is his preferred destination, which it isn't. Barcelona is. Also, we are running out of internationals. Aren't we running out of international squad spots where we could get a defender and a midfielder? You know what? It's that time of year, isn't it, where we need to start working out what the homegrown quota is for Liverpool. I actually don't know, because that's normally one of my go-tos. Why aren't we signing someone? There's literally not a space in the squad. I think if Thiago, Matip and Adrian have gone, then that's, you know, I know we had to do a little diddle, didn't we, where Adrian had to be unregistered for Europe last season to allow us to get enough in, but I feel like we're probably all right in terms of
it feels like that pops up every summer, doesn't it? At some point, someone will mention home
because it's never thought about until you have to think about it. Yeah. And it's mad that we have to think about it, but this is the way we talk about football these days. And Michael McGuinness back again says, just see we will go for Coman if Chiesa deal fails.
Is that true?
That is the first I've heard of that. Kingsley Coman, I don't even know how old he is at this point. In my head, he's 21 forever.
I mean, he feels more injury prone off the top of my head than Chiesa does. So,
well, we'll have to see.
I'll have to do my homework on that.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll see. We might have to have a deep dive special if that becomes any more breaking in the next 4 days, but we shall see on that one anyway. Before then, thank you so much for joining us. Do check out the Mamadash show. Please use the code MATECH if you want to get 3 months for the price of one over on redmenplus.com, and of course make sure you check out Josh's Substack as well. distancecovered.substack.com for more Josh in your life, which this is the most Josh I've had in my life basically up to this point, and it's marvellous. So
is it too much though? Is that the question?
Well, listen, mates, let's call it an end here so that we don't have to find out.
Just enough, yeah.
Yeah, great. Chris will return, of course, for Deep Dive next week. So yeah, if you didn't enjoy me doing this, then it's fine. It's not a thing. Other than that, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, drop a like, check out Redmen Plus, and we'll see you all very, very soon.